We'll call this June 20th, the day before the longest day, PZA meeting to order. And roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Mr. Stauffenberg. Mr. Tripp.
Present.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Tholen. Ms. Polk. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Einfeld. Mr. Payton. Ms. Peters. Mr. Ritter.
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Wheeler.
He was here.
Mr. Lear. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have no public comment. And what was that? Approval of the May 16th minutes. Moved by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Payton. Any discussion, additions, or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I'd like permission to move transportation number 6 to number...
Wait till Andy gets back, we might as well just continue.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna need to talk about
All right. Under building, stormwater MS4 program discussion.
Just like every PZA meeting, we are required by our stormwater program to ask if anyone has any stormwater or MS4 program issues to discuss.
Seeing none, going on to zoning, ex parte communications to committee.
Okay. Recently, Mr. Ray Fairfield has received phone calls from Paul Gaspar and Kathy DePoyster with concerns about ZBA case 18-27 by Borrego Solar in Rockville Township. This case will be going before the Zoning Board of Appeals on Monday. He forwarded their phone numbers to me in an email, and so just for openness, Andy thought it would be best that I mention all of this to the board. I have called Mr. Gaspar back and advised him of when the hearing was and answered some of his questions. I have been unable to contact Ms. DePoyster yet.
And instructions for the committee as far as getting phone calls, you should tell the people.
Well, that's the best way to handle it. We cannot dictate to you what you can and can't do, but if you want to avoid ex parte communications, you're best to inform them of the hearing, and that is the best place for them to get their views and points across.
Inform them.
It's on the record, and all parties get to hear that record.
Okay. We happen to go through the agenda, so we're up to number 6. Yes. Okay, transportation, creation of transportation economic development project coordinator position, grant funded. You've received a sheet for that.
Did you want to start, Andy, or?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This opportunity arose from a conversation I had with, well, really it was a few mayors, the Economic Alliance, and then Jeff, regarding, it's the whole CSL Nucor expansion and all of the traffic related, infrastructure issues that are surrounding those. Many people know that CSL has this, monumental is not a big enough word for it, expansion going on. And they're not asking the city or the county for any money or the state. What they're asking for from the county and from the state is help with the traffic situations in the Route 50 corridor. And Jeff had a great idea. He says, we have an unfunded grant position that revolves around transportation. And we could potentially fund a vast majority of that position to provide CSL and the mayors and the county, who is now the county and the alliance are kind of taking the lead in agreement with the mayors on being that single point of contact. We need someone to manage those issues, to be the connection between IDOT and the county. Because we're talking about the stoplight in front of Denny's, the entrances into CSL, the widening of the lanes to include turn lanes, streetscaping, widening of Route 50 in general, the entrances to the county, the roads from Nucor. May have heard that Nucor is now all in the county, and they've given some land to Bourbonnais to build a road. So all of these transportation, Bourbonnais Parkway, all of these things, and it could be in Kankakee as well. It could be in Momence. It's all over the county. So this is an opportunity for us to, with no general fund money for the actual salary, to be able to provide that coordination that is being asked of the county on these transportation related issues, which is 99.9% of what is going on with CSL right now. So I was just out there yesterday with the governor and the deputy secretary of IDOT and director of DCEO, and that the whole meeting was about infrastructure to feed this project so it can be everything that it can be. So in the conversations I've had with the Alliance, they agree, they'll bring it to their board after we're done. We have to do some modifications to the MPO, which we'll handle in order to include this. And then also we have the enterprise zone has voted, and any supplementary pay up to another $30,000 a year will, if that's what it takes to hire this individual, because they have to have some wherewithal to be able to work with all of the mayors, IDOT, the employers, all of that kind of stuff. So it seems like we have a working model. The only thing the county would do would be to provide the health insurance, the benefits for the employee, just like we do with the other Alliance employees that are 2 at this point. So it would be a third. So our basic commitment to the Alliance at this point is the benefits for 2 employees were reimbursed for everything else, and that would be the same situation for this third. And so I had to bring it to this committee because it takes, per the intergovernmental agreement, it takes the county board to approve this position. And so that's why I brought it here. And if you agree, we would ask to forward it on to finance for their final blessing to send to the board.
What's the estimated cost of the benefits?
If it's a single individual, you're talking no more than 20 grand a year. And that's for, that's probably a family with children, IMRF, the whole deal. Because if you add up the other 2 positions, we get reimbursed everything, but our contribution is around 60 right now, and I estimate this would be like another 20 at this point, based on the pay scales and how much you contribute to IMRF.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Family coverage is about 16.
Yeah, it's about family
Mr. Tripp?
16.
Yeah. A couple of them.
One, isn't the engineering work done for that area already? Waiting for funding and ready to go? So that part of it should be, I think the idea is good. I think it's a no-brainer, in fact. But I think the engineering work for that whole complex.
Well, he wouldn't be doing the engineering work, but you have.
I'm able to comment. The study on the Route 50 corner there, the one in front of Denny's, was 2004. Those are old traffic numbers that has to be, and it's way down on the list with IDOT. What we talked about yesterday was moving that up on the list to accommodate this. We have a new traffic study that's going on right now that'll be complete next week. This position will also, since we're a grantable entity, this position will be the one who can apply for and receive grants for all of the bike paths that CSL is asking for, the walking islands, if you will, so you don't get caught out in traffic going from work over to eat lunch, all of those different things. We have to coordinate with Metro Bus because they want a bus stop in there. There's a lot of different moving parts. So we wouldn't do the engineering. We would make sure that all of these folks, all of the mayors, the county planning department, transportation department here, MPO, and the Alliance are all connected, and that person is that one point of contact to make sure everybody's on the same page regarding the transportation issues. And I can't stress enough, like Hobby Avenue right now is a major connector, and Dell can speak to that. It's at the top of the MPO list as far as truck traffic to keep them moving north and south to get on and off, between the 2 cities. And a lot of residents use that too to go north and head towards the mall area and things like that. So that person would also be involved in that transportation effort as well.
Would the entrance to CSL that's on Armour Road there, by the stop sign, would that be closed, or that would always remain open?
Their thought now is, again, this is now, we're just starting this, is to leave that open, but they have the approval to put a new stoplight in straight across from Lowe's and Oberweis,
Mm-hmm.
and that be the main entrance for all the employees.
Okay, so,
Also, the trucks will have there'll be a turn lane there, and then a separate turn lane for trucks to go in where Bungie used to go in. Because you remember how it used to be, Bungie would swing way out, the trucks would come way out. This would mitigate that to be able to have the trucks go in the back entrance around and go behind.
and then the one on off Armor is just for limited traffic that goes to that side of the plant?
It would be the ones, mainly the people that are coming down Armor Road from the west.
Okay,
You know, so you wouldn't have a lot of people turning that corner, if you will, by Denny's to go ahead and turn again. That whole corner's frankly the busiest
Yeah.
corner in the whole county.
right.
And it needs to be worked on anyway, and the old study is not adequate, even for what we have today.
Okay,
But we also have, you know, beautification projects that the county can get grants for. This person would write those grants. The state's giving away, well, not giving away is not the right word. You can apply for money from the state. They might send you the money someday. Sorry, but it seems to be the way things work these days. But that's the whole thought of this is the mayors are on board. The alliance is on board for us, and to take the lead is needs to be the point contact, and then we'd be able to communicate properly and work with all of the mayors to make sure that this expansion is everything it should be.
is there any contribution from the municipalities?
No, not at this point.
Is that a possibility?
I think it's always a possibility. I think that, you know, one of the ways that I approach this is prove the worth, and then, you know, we never know what kind of applicant we're going to get. If we get an
Okay.
all-star, maybe we go to those folks.
Okay,
You know.
Mr. Tripp?
Just one extra question on office space, and the expense that brings. Not a big deal?
The position has to be housed here. We envision the business card has two sides. One will be the transportation department title, if you will, and they will have duties here as far as the transportation department goes, working under Jeff, but they will also be this, for lack of a better term, liaison on this project where anything traffic. So they will be here. Frankly, they don't have room over at the Alliance anymore. They've got 3 different entities, I believe, in that Alliance, and everything's taken up.
We've got room on the second floor,
They will be
right?
housed
Oh,
in
yeah,
the plant.
we got plenty of room.
Yeah.
Dell said he would share his office.
Oh,
Exactly.
he's got 3 offices now.
I have room. Have a lot of room. Fact is that these kind of projects have a lot of needs, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of players, and part of this position would be bringing all of that together. Some of those needs don't even have a plan at this point. So it'll be developing those plans, working with all of the stakeholders to bring it all together into a project, and then once a project's agreed upon, their job would be to follow it through to construction, including looking for grant money and funding for it.
Okay, Mr. Washington?
Am I correct in assuming that this is a grant position? And if for whatever reason occurs, the grant monies dry up, the position dries up with it?
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the decision of this committee to make that recommendation to the board. Though the way the alliance agreement is written says something to the effect of, you know, funding availability, funding may be withdrawn or limited by the Kankakee County Board. We reserve that. So we're not bound if that grant goes away, we're bound to say we can't afford it or we can't afford it, or we would like partners in this endeavor.
Okay,
That's I'm just speaking a word of caution because in
Oh,
the
yeah.
past, we have had many instances where we've had deputies that were brought in on grants and then there was no end to it. When the grant dried up, the deputy was taken on full and that cost was transferred to the full county board rather than just something that happened and then it's cut off.
This is not a special grant. This is part of our normal transportation planning grant that we receive every year, and we have received since 1985, 83. So, yes,
But
the
if it
numbers
does,
change every
yeah.
year, but the grant is not likely to go away.
Yeah, you have my commitment. I'm sure everybody else here will keep an eye on that. If we see that grant go away, then we would have a decision to make.
okay. Is there a motion to send this on to finance by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Tripp? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Oh, yeah, very good point. Roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff? Mr. Stauffenberg? Mr. Tripp? Mr. Washington? Mr. Mulcahy? Mr. Payton? Mr. Ritter? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Surprised Mr. Washington didn't catch that. The keeper of the funds. Okay, did we didn't do the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, there is no amendment necessary.
Oh.
It's written in there in such a way that we did.
Okay, thank you. Any old business? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. This is for information for the committee. Dell and I were on the phone with ComEd a couple days ago, and we were trying to respond to, and Dell can, chime in whenever he feels necessary or I missed something, but we were checking because we had heard from some of the developers that they said, in air quotes, all the capacity is filled up in Kankakee County for these solar farms. The grid can take no more, basically. And so that was kind of an odd statement. We hadn't heard that before. And so we got on the phone with some higher ups at ComEd, our people who handles local affairs, and then also they got the people that's over solar. And basically, we did find out that there are 450 applications out there for solar farms around the state. We have 47 here, Dell?
Well, they're talking community solar gardens only.
Right, that's community.
They said 450 plus in the
Right.
ComEd territory.
In the comment?
In
I don't-
ComEd
That's ComEd territory,
Yeah,
not
I forgot there's
Amaranth. So that's
Yeah,
just ComEd territory, I
Yep.
believe, is what they're talking about.
that's a good point.
And we currently have 45.
One of ours are the utility scale, the 400 acre ones.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. So we were advised that there is going to be a lottery for those sites because there's so many on the community side. There's going to be a lottery. So beyond us knowing that the energy credits may not be available for all of them, and
The
everyone's
energy,
not going to be selected.
the energy what, credits?
Yeah, the credits. There's only so many energy credits
Okay.
out there, so
All right.
that's a limiting factor. Then there's also a lottery involved in that, and there's a third limiting factor, which is clusters around the infrastructure to access the grid. So, in order of how you sent the check to Springfield, basically, that's where you're at on the waiting list. So, I guess the main thing would be is that every solar farm we approve, as we have said, probably won't be built. But now at least I want to let the committee know that it may explain why we're getting so many applicants because everybody's buying a ticket to get in the lottery. That's kind of the way it seems to me.
Did you say in accordance with when they sent it in, so it's based on a date, or it's a actual lottery?
No, when you're approved, if you will, and you win the lottery, let's just say there's 3 that are around a place that only has infrastructure for 2. Then they'll go by whoever sent the check into Springfield first.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
it's
makes sense.
not a system-wide capacity issue, it's a locational capacity issue. Each substation that they're tying into can only handle so much power. And some of them, they have several solar farms around them. If that substation cannot handle all of them and they were to all get accepted, they would be approved by ComEd on a first come, first served basis.
Yeah.
So even though they won the lottery, they may not be able to be built, actually, depending on their location.
Okay.
Right.
Now, ComEd did say, though, that they can always increase capacity, but that is at the cost of the developer, so.
Yeah.
the
And so I
light,
think the
they may
number was
not want
1
to.
out of every 7.
1 out of every 7, yeah, they have 7 times more applications than they have credits for.
Yeah.
So 1 in 7 is going to get approved.
So I thought it was interesting, and maybe for the public to know that we've tried to tell them before that not every one of these is going to end up, and it may not pass engineering even to get to the point of getting in the lottery. So timing and all this is somewhat elusive because I guess they're looking for a new executive director of this agency in the state. So
Yeah, they must have the local approval as part of the package before they can get into the lottery.
Right.
So they have to see us first. I was under the impression that last I had heard was that the lottery would be occurring in October, but talking with ComEd, the person who is going to be running all of this hasn't even been selected yet, and they're actually looking at it be more likely January before that lottery would occur.
Mr. Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a member of the committee, but I attended today to voice a couple of things. In the county board meeting the other day, the gentleman who made the presentation on the Highland Road application for special use brought up some important things that struck me, and after a little thought, I thought some of his recommendations and things could be implemented into our ordinance. The type of solar panels interested me. There are two types, I didn't know that. And one is apparently much better for the environment than the other. But some of his suggestions impressed me, and I would think that possibly we could integrate those into our ordinance so that when it comes time for construction, those would be the things that the builders would have to implement into their construction. The second thing is, what is the process? I don't attend PZA, and it may have been covered, but the process after we approve the special use, what is the process from that point on, from the county's end of it and in the planning department's end of it? Thank you.
Okay, well, the first part, the county board always has the option of updating their ordinances or creating new ordinances. You can always do that, but there's a process to follow. And generally that process will take at least 3 months. So if you were to do that now, we'd be looking at October or November, which could certainly hurt projects that are coming. And of course, you can't go backwards on it. So all of them that you've already approved would be approved as they are. So any changes in solar panels would not affect those projects. And there are actually more than 2 types. He was only talking about 2 types. So while you can do it, I'd be very cautious about doing that. You want to try to keep the playing field open as much as possible so that you're not limiting yourself when new ideas or new technologies come out. And really it's up to you to determine that on a case-by-case basis as they're presented to you. So I don't know that we would want to limit that in an actual ordinance. That being said, there are some things that have come to light since that ordinance was adopted, such as the pollinator ground covers, and some of that was never thought about and wasn't really a thing when that ordinance was approved. So there are some openings there. I don't know that technology moves so fast, I don't know that I would limit technology.
And just as a quick follow-up, we did, while we think it addresses it in the ordinance, we probably should change it at some point for the fear that if landscaping is put in and it's not maintained or it dies and is not replaced, that should be directly spelled out as finable as well. Right now, it's if you don't mow and the weeds overgrow, then you could get fined X amount of dollars per day or whatever. The implication, or it implies that that's the same thing for landscaping, but doesn't specifically say it. So when it goes through the ZBA process, that's what we ask ZBA to approve, that it's with this stipulation. So we can do that as part of for them to be approved, they have to do the landscaping, they have to maintain it, or this part of our fining ordinance applies. So we can bridge the gap, I guess is what I'm saying, until we're able to update this like we want to.
Yeah, all solar farms are special use permits. Because they're asking for something special, the board is capable of putting special conditions upon them, as long as it's reasonably related to the project. So rather than change the ordinance, it would probably be more appropriate and expeditious to simply put them on as conditions to each site. And we are regularly now putting the pollinator issue and the landscaping issue in as proposed conditions.
Okay.
And then to the process itself, we've granted a special use. Now the next step is
County board. Right.
Well, no, the county board has approved the special, you're talking about an approved one. Next step is we wait for them to apply for their building permit. Whereas they will submit all of their stormwater plans, their construction plans, and drainage plans, all of that will be reviewed. Since they are a commercial project, our third-party reviewer, Kessler and Associates, will be reviewing those for us. Unless we have somebody else at the time, we're probably next spring before we would start seeing any of those. That all gets reviewed internally, and if they meet all of the codes, then we issue a building permit and they start construction.
They will not do that unless they are approved by the,
Well, I mean, that's a private industry decision, but I'm assuming that if they don't get the credits, they're not going to go forward with the project.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Where does the drainage district's input come in that process? Do they work with the engineering firm, or do we bring that engineering information to them and say, this is what we have, do you concur?
Well, they should, the developer's engineers should be working with the drainage districts as part of their due diligence as they're developing those plans. And of course, our review will be checking on that. So unfortunately, we don't necessarily know what infrastructure the drainage districts have in place unless they come forward with it. But we do know whether a site is in the drainage district or not, and we can certainly contact them.
So we, just to clarify, we can't impose the project on the drainage district. We need them to work with us to help identify where things are. And if that happens, then we could make the best judgment whether it's a engineering worthy endeavor.
That would be ideal. I mean, you know, a lot of this is going to be decisions by the private developer. If they are limited in locations on a particular site because of drainage tiles, they'll have to redesign their plans. Now, those, if it's still a viable project after they do that for them, then they can move forward. If it's not, it might get withdrawn. So each site is different. We got some that have little or no drainage tiles, and others have some pretty large mains running through them.
Mr. Washington.
Does the county possess a mapping of the drainage tiles throughout the drainage districts?
No, because of the age and the way those records are kept, we do not. We do have them for some properties and some locations, but the developers are required to map the drainage tiles on each site. That's got to be part of that building permit application.
That's often,
So they have all said that they were hiring the companies that specialize in that to do that. How accurate those are, I can't say. But
it's often the landowner would have a tile map if he's that fortunate. Drainage districts don't. Or from my perspective, being a drainage district commissioner, we don't.
Why? I mean,
Because we're not in charge of the tiles. We're in charge of the ditches. Some drainage districts are in charge of the mains, but ours is not.
in other words, we got a hodgepodge of setup.
Yeah.
some may be put in without any mapping whatsoever, just, you know, to fix an issue, dig a trench, put a pipe in there. Nobody recorded where that pipe was at. So I mean, that's an issue, but the more information we have, the better review we can do and the better chance of avoiding those tiles.
I don't know if there's technology that allows you to find out where they are. Most people know where their main is. They don't also often know where the laterals are. Unless it was systematically tiled every 75 feet or whatever.
No.
Mr. Vickery?
Would it be appropriate to have the drainage district sign off as part of the process?
I don't think they would do that.
I don't know that we could get them to do that. I don't know that we could force them to do that. It would be quite possible if you required that a drainage district could stop an entire project just by refusing to sign off on it without any merit whatsoever. You would be delegating your
Liability.
approval authority to the drainage district. I don't know that you'd want to do that. That's a question for legal as to whether you even can.
Would you agree, Mr. Stauffenberg? Are you involved in a drainage district at all? Right?
There's technology now to fly it in the fall, and you can see them from the air.
Yeah, we had one, our aerial photos, you could actually see the line.
Yeah, we located.
I think it was a main, but you could
Yeah.
actually see. where-
Usually mains, not laterals, right?
People that have dug them passed on, and my dad said my grandpa and another guy dug ours by hand to the creek, over a mile.
Fact is, if they break a tile, the tile will get fixed.
That's what you did in the wintertime before it froze.
Yeah,
And in many cases will probably be better than what's there before,
Yeah.
there now, because a lot of them are just plain clay tiles that have been in the ground for 70, 80 years. They're gonna be replaced with PVC.
Okay, going on to any new business? Mr. Stauffenberg first.
thank you, Chairman. Dell, I got a call from an agent that insures the hotel by Denny's,
Mhm.
who claims we're trying to close them down. I know the sheriff has many calls there. I'm on the criminal justice committee, and he's sick of going out to there and Birch's Trailer Court. Yeah, and he's got to spend about $200,000, he said, to fix things, and he wants to know whether to spend it or not, if we're gonna close him down. I said, well, I'm not aware of us closing this down. You know what the status is there?
The hotel applied for a building permit for repairs on the catwalks and the stairs.
Yeah.
I do not have a structural engineer on staff. So we could not determine if those repairs were adequate or not. We hired a structural engineer to look at the property and tell us if their plans were adequate or not. We have not got that report back yet, so that is the status of that.
Is that hotel in CSL Bearings plans of
I
taking that
have
whole
no
corridor?
idea.
It's
They're not crossing?
They're not in their plans for occupying that or.
That entire triangle is in the county, the trailer park, the
Right.
Denny's, and the hotel is
I
ours.
think the sheriff committed in one of his meetings that he thought it was gonna take in Birch's Trailer Court, what used to be, and all of that area also, and I thought, holy moly.
I have not seen any of the CSL's plans, so
Yeah, I
I
have
can't
not
say
either.
that. That's kind of why we need this position to bring all of that together.
Oh, okay.
It's on the Bungie property, I believe, yeah.
So basically, we're just waiting for the structural engineer's report.
Yes, and then we have to, determine if what they've submitted for their building permit is adequate or not.
Are you addressing this, Mr. Chairman, or you? No.
Not at this point, no, the conversation.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Lear?
If I might go back, Mr. Chairman, to the ex parte communications, W said in terms of if we receive phone calls, we should inform the individual of the hearing. Would we tell them the agenda that is, I guess I'm a little confused on what kind of information we'd have available to share with a caller. If an agenda's come out for a hearing, we would know that, but that only comes out 24 hours, 48 hours before a hearing. So I'm not sure.
The amount of information you have depends on where in the process
Yeah,
you would get that call. Many times those calls start coming in as soon as notice goes out, which is generally 15 days before the agenda is even posted. If you're in doubt, you can always give them my number.
okay.
Okay, that's probably the best route to take. The whole purpose behind this is that everything that is said, all information about these type of cases needs to be done in a public setting. And when you're on the phone with somebody individual, only the two of you are hearing that information, which could be information that could be useful to the rest of the board or the committees. So while it can't stop you from talking to people, you really should bring that information of what was talked about and who you talked to and at the next available committee meeting or board meeting. It's best to avoid it altogether. Then there's absolutely no hint of any type of ex parte communications, but sometimes it happens. You'll get a letter in the mail. You don't know the content of that letter till you've opened it. In which case, you should be bringing that letter here so that everybody has that same information. Everybody can question it and review it.
Thank you.
But yeah, if you want to, if somebody calls you wanting information, it may very well be best just to have them call me.
Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emails, I've been getting emails.
Again, you don't know the content of an email till you read it. But you can certainly print it off and distribute it to the PZA committee or the next committee so that it's open.
What I've done, I've gotten some board members that have forwarded things on to me because of my request to bring it to this committee and let people know about what ex parte communication. I'm just having Dell keep a folder that he can bring to PZA. And I don't know, we probably should make the full board aware at the full board meeting of all communications, but that's to me the best way that I could create a hub of all potential ex parte communication.
If you forward those emails to me or letters to me, I'm kind of thinking that this ex parte communications to the committee will be a standing item on our agenda. And then we will review each one of those at the committee so that it's in a record in the public view. Now phone calls, you'll just have to report those yourselves. But
And I did receive a FOIA for text messages, so realize that those are part of
text
this as
messages
well.
count too. Any form of communication. We've been getting a lot of FOIAs lately.
Okay. Did we cover new business?
I asked Eric to come up in case anybody was interested in the law being adopted down in Springfield, not signed by the governor, on how solar farms are assessed. If anybody in the committee is concerned or has a question about that, if you'd like to hear it, if
They have decided what they're going to do?
yes.
Yeah.
All right, let me get you the mic.
You're on.
Morning.
Good morning.
Senate Bill 486, I believe that's the right number, it passed both houses on May 30th. One of the main tenets of that passage was the value per megawatt that is going to be in place. It's the formula very similar to wind energy, where it's a per megawatt value. This for solar is going to be $218,000 per megawatt. That's land and improvements combined per megawatt. So there are some other provisions in there, just like with wind. The developer should provide us with, or shall actually provide us with a legal description of the project itself, so that we can assign a separate PIN number. That way, that bill can be sent to the developer or the project owner, and they can pay the taxes themselves on that part. But then whatever land is left over and still being farmed, say for example, would keep its own identity, so that the bill could be sent to the landowner themselves for that portion that's not being used for the solar farm. So those are two big things. We did fight through the idea. I know industry wanted a separate improvement only PIN from the land. That makes it almost impossible to sell it at a tax sale if the taxes are not paid. So we did kind of have that victory there, if you will. It's all the PIN would be combined. Land and improvements would be combined on one PIN. If there's anybody in here that has any questions, though, I can certainly answer questions about the remainder of that statute, or the combination of those statutes.
So that it is required that that parcel is separated out. It says it has its own PIN, and it's not part of the farm, the rest of the farm?
Let me clarify. I think I said they shall. I believe the statute actually says that the owner of the land shall ask the project developer, and at the request of the owner, then the project developer must give us a separate legal. So if the owner of the land doesn't want to split it, they don't have to. But if they ask the company must do it at the company's expense.
That would be commonly known. In other words, we're not going to run into an instance where the farmer didn't know that, or the landowner, I should say, and if the taxes weren't paid, he'd be responsible for it. Correct?
Well,
how do you?
It goes back to, and you know, I've said it before. Even if you're leasing your ground, even if the lessee is responsible for the payment of the taxes, if those taxes aren't paid, you still lose your ground. So I would go back to something else that I've said multiple times, which is, if you are a landowner and you're going to lease this to a solar project or anything else, be very mindful of the language that is in that lease, because it may, you know, if you do it properly, you probably have some civil action rights if they don't pay the bill. The best thing you can do is to have the right language in there to protect yourself.
If they separated out the parcel that was in the solar farm,
Yes.
if that's done,
Yes.
and the taxes aren't paid, then the only recourse the county would have would be to sell that portion.
That's correct. I'm sorry if I missed that
No.
first part, but yeah, it would protect. Essentially, what it does is if you own 100 acres and you lease 80 of it, and the 20 acres are not leased, then those 20 acres that aren't leased can't be jeopardized by the lack of payment for the solar farm. It separates the two out. That's the point.
But that has to be done as by request of the landowner.
The landowner goes to the project owner and asks them to do it, and then the project owner at their expense would have to give us a legal description to make that happen. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
By the way, folks, if there's anybody in here that wants to talk any further about this, I do have a Farmland Assessment Review Committee meeting a week from today on the second floor at 10 a.m. So we will this will be part of the discussion. I think it's a very it's a topic that's very big to the agriculture community. So we want to incorporate that into our meeting this year, and it'll be there at 10 o'clock on the 27th on the second floor.
Okay. One other question, the 218,000 per megawatt.
Yep.
What was the developers requesting that be made?
They wanted 199, and we advocated for something closer to 506 with the land.
$506 with the land?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to make it all one number, land and improvements combined,
Okay.
We had 446 for the improvements and 10,000 per acre for the land, which we assume is about 6 acres of consumption per megawatt. So if you add 60,000 to the 446, we're at 506. Industry wanted 199. The legislature settled at 218.
So the benefit was greater for them.
Well, remember, and this is the official statement that I would make to anybody. This is a preferential assessment. We knew that going in. You know, a formulated assessment is likely preferential. How preferential that's going to be is a legislative decision, and that was made in Springfield. That's not anything that I'm going to take responsibility for. They chose to make it that preferential, and we'll go ahead and move forward and put it on the tax roll accordance with the law.
What is it for the wind turbines per megawatt?
It's 360,000 times a trending factor. That trending factor this year is 1.22. So if you take 360,000 times 1.22, you end up at $439,200 a megawatt. And I should say that the solar legislation does also have a trending factor opportunity in it, along with depreciation, just like wind. So it will build up value over time with the CPI, the adjustment in CPI. But right now, if you were to construct a megawatt of wind, it's $439,200 per megawatt, fair cash value. If you brand new with no depreciation, and if you construct a megawatt of solar, it's $218,000.
What's the rationale behind that? I'm still asking my question, Mr. Washington.
In order to find the rationale behind it, I think you'd have to ask the legislature, because I can't figure that out.
Huh?
Because it's because, by the way, folks, we tried to make it as equitable with other renewable energy type projects like wind, and when we tried that, we were unsuccessful. So if somebody has that answer, it probably would be down in Springfield. It's not going to come from this microphone today.
So this county would rather have wind turbines than solar farms.
Well, if you look at straight value, I suppose, maybe, I don't know.
Mr. Washington had
Thank
the
you, sir.
definitive question, I'm sure.
As these projects are completed, when they come into your office, will you be notifying the landowners that they have to request?
He's not at his mic. Mr. Washington, could you lean over to your microphone and repeat that, please? Your voice does not carry to the mic.
As the projects are coming through and finalized, I asked Eric if he would be notifying the landowners that they have to request that information.
Okay.
There has to be a mechanism to notify them. We don't want them stranded and finding out later on when they get ready to pay their taxes that they're not completely
To protect
paying
them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And your
That's
answer was?
That's a good point. I honestly didn't give that, to this point, hadn't given that any thought. I wonder if a good mechanism to get that word out might be through the Farm Bureau. So when I tell, because those folks that own the land probably, are in contact with the Farm Bureau some, maybe that might be a good way to do it. I'd have to think about my contacting an individual for that purpose. Is that overstepping in any way? I'd have to think about that or not. Because if I do it for one, and I miss somebody, am I that would be my concern, and I don't know if that's a valid concern or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Del, you rarely see the landowner, you just see the developer that would come in and pull applications.
I actually have not met a landowner yet on one of these. So.
Okay. So we wouldn't see them usually walk in the building. We would have to, I don't know, maybe require certified mail to the landowner from the developer advising them of this. You see what I mean? We'd have to somehow put that in our ordinance or something in order to make sure, if that's what we want to do. I think Farm Bureau is a pretty good idea. I mean, they got a newsletter. I think that's a real good idea. Bill, get on that, I'm sure, right? You know, guy. No. But no, we could do that. I mean, we could maybe send a letter if you want over to the Farm Bureau and ask them to notify everybody. That might be.
Chad Miller, I believe, is supposed to be here next Wednesday.
Yeah.
They could, Chad would be there. You could mention that at your Tuesday meeting.
Sure.
There you go.
Wednesday?
That's one of the reasons I thought about that, is because I believe he'll be here.
Okay. You're in charge of that.
We do a lot of protestations about preserving the land and so on and so forth.
Louder, please. What was that?
There are a lot of protestations about preserving the land when people want to develop for other reasons. And I just believe that you need to preserve the people that own the land, give them as much information as possible when they're entering into any kind of engagements or anything that is going to affect them and the county.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Vickery.
Chad Miller and Farm Bureau were up in Sumner Township to talk about wind turbines. They brought in a lawyer to give advice. So I think Farm Bureau and Chad Miller would be a great addition to that information cycle.
That's correct, although you have absentee landlords also.
Yeah.
That would have to be contacted. Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see some of the questions that Mr. Blair is raising in terms of informing property owners. If this is a kind of special assessment, there are other cases where property has some kind of a reduction because of a special. If the county starts having to notify every senior citizen when they turn 65 that they get I've lost the word, but anyway, that they
A senior exemption, sir?
yeah, we would put a huge burden on our staff, and so I'm a little bit concerned about notifying individual property owners in terms of some provision of the law. But I certainly would encourage us to use the Farm Bureau as one vehicle to do that.
Okay.
Just a number, the increase in assessment over what it's already assessed as farmland is about 4,500%. If anybody wonders, it's about,
I've got a sheet
we
right
did
here,
the
Andy.
math, it was, if you took all of the community and the utility together, it's over $1 million in increased tax revenue. That's for all taxing districts. The county obviously is a smaller portion of that, one of the smallest, to be honest, but schools, all of that, you know, that's where that, people say follow the money. I tell them follow it to your school district, into your road district, into your drainage district, that kind of thing.
Not drainage district.
Well, not drainage, you're right. But those townships, all of those folks are making more on this. And we are too. What was the increase? Goes from $36 on a 20-acre solar site,
2 megawatts,
or
yeah.
2 megawatt, a 20-acre roughly, up to $1,600. So times 45, you know, and the increase, and that's just the county. And then the increase on the 400 site that we have, that one goes up by almost 58,000. So, and that's just our part. So, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Any others? All right. Any other new business? Old business? No, new business. Motion. Oh, the executive committee, excuse me, the executive committee for next week has been canceled for those of you that pertains to. Number 5, Mr. Ritter.
Yeah, I thought I heard some scuttle about a lawsuit that had been filed. They were going to say something about.
Not at this time.
Okay.
The full board needs to be involved.
Okay.
At the same time, so we'll go into executive session. Full board.
Would you say that again? Because I didn't have your mic on. That's it. Thank you.
Full board will discuss that matter, and there'll be an executive session at the full board.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Stauffenberg, seconded by Mr. Washington. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.